This episode of Standard Orbit is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 180,000 titles for smartphone, tablet, and desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice and help Trek FM at the same time, visit audibletrial.com/TrekFM. And also by Enterprise in Space, an international program for the nonprofit National Space Society. Find out how you can help science and education and become a virtual crew member aboard the NSS Enterprise Orbiter by visiting enterpriseinspace.org. Want to join the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode? Join the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field. We look forward to seeing you there.
My name is Nicholas Meyer, director of Star Treks 2 and 6, and you are listening to Standard Orbit on Trek FM.
Risk is our business.
It's like nothing we've dealt with before.
My golly, Jim, I'm beginning to think I can cure a rainy day.
I can't change the laws of physics.
Now in Standard Orbit.
Welcome, everyone, to Standard Orbit, Trek FM's dedicated podcast to the original and new cast of Captain Kirk and the Enterprise. I'm Ken Tripp.
I'm Hayley Stoddart. We're back again. Sans Zach Moore. He's off enjoying some very, very well-deserved shore leave. Although I do have to admit, he kind of had that already. I mean, he went to LA. He got to go to the Paley Center and see all that awesome Discovery costumes and stuff like that. So I don't know about this week, Ken, for him. So
So you're saying he's AWOL as opposed to shore leave? Because, you know, that's a pretty steep offense in the old Starfleet command.
Possibly. I mean, we'll give it to him again this week. I'm going to be on shore leave here in a couple weeks myself, so I guess it's okay. But so we're going to talk about a character that I actually am really excited to talk about a little bit. We're going to talk about Scotty. I really like Scotty. He's probably my second favorite character of TOS, but some of his lines that he's said in the episodes that are just really completely memorable, I think, and I'm really excited. What about you, Ken?
I love Scotty. How can you not? He definitely was a character that I think brought a lot to the show. You need a chief engineer. I love the stories in his biography, you know, of how he got the role, how many voices he did in order to settle on the Scottish one being an engineer, which then formed the character. James Doohan, middle name is Montgomery, so you got Montgomery Scott. Worked out, I thought, pretty brilliantly. I've seen him at a convention once back when they were making Star Trek V in Maine. He was there, and he was a real gentleman. Funny as all get out, very personable. He, you know, James Doohan is really brought to life, I think, you know, as we say in Star Trek, because what isn't iconic in Star Trek anymore? I guess it's maybe an overused word, but I will tend to use it where it comes to the original series, because without them, all the rest would be nothing. And his role, even though, as we were saying off camera, you know, TNG was trying to do without an engineer. And it's like, you can't go without an engineer. And I think they really haven't mastered the talent, the humor, and just the personality of Montgomery Scott as the role of engineer. In any of the following series, I would say he was probably the most fun.
I would agree with you there. I think that it's interesting. We were discussing off mic. I was reading an article in one of the magazines I have. He got a letter from Gene Roddenberry saying, essentially, thanks for, you know, doing Where No Man Has Gone Before, but we've decided we don't need an engineer. And it's like, but it's a mechanical ship. You need somebody who can fix all of this stuff when things go wrong, which is a lot of plot points throughout Star Trek. Things going wrong, and who rescues and saves the day but the engineer. So you can't rely on just your scientists to fix things.
Well, in TOS you did a lot, actually.
Yeah, you did.
Which was actually kind of funny. which made him, a character who everybody, considered a miracle worker and all that stuff. But there were more than, I don't know, a lot of circumstances where, Spock or someone else had to kind of come to the rescue to help save the ship. But he had his moments, that's for sure. So what do you think about this format we're going to do today?
I like it. I think it's very different rather than just discussing points about the character that we like. Discussing some of his lines that he had. I think it's really fun, and I hope listeners enjoy it. They can definitely, if we miss some, please let us know in the comments what ones you like, because there's something for everybody, and I think we pick the ones that stand out to us the most, aside from the ones that are probably most known. And so I'm really excited about it.
Well, thanks. I think this will work out well. Rather than doing a straight biography, this is, we're going to kind of go in order from oldest to newest. Obviously, Hayley hit it right on the head. Listeners, your favorite quotes, let us know on the Babel conference as you go. And Hayley, and you're going to kick us off, but remember, you have to do it with a Scottish accent.
Oh, I wouldn't even try. I know I have some Scottish ancestry, but I do not want to offend my
offend. It's supposed to be
listeners.
Have you heard Scotty's accent from time to time? What do you mean offend?
This is true, but no.
No. Wow. Okay, she's refusing direct orders. Of course, I have no authority, so you're not refusing anything. So let's have fun with this and take it away. What's the first line you want to talk about here?
All right. I mean, we can't not talk about Scotty without saying, I cannot change the laws of physics. I've got to have 30 minutes. This is from TOS The Naked Time. And that line, I cannot change the laws of physics. It's brilliant.
Well,
you can't.
No, you can't. However, they did.
Well, yeah.
or Spock did. Yeah, I think that, when Riley shuts off the engines and everything goes cold and they're spinning into spinning out of orbit, I guess, and into the atmosphere, there was obviously a lot of pressure. But the way I think they utilize Scotty in all these shows is perfect, right? He always seems to have that right line at the right time. But what I remember the most about him saying that line, I cannot change the laws of physics. He's talking into the to the communication system back to the bridge, but the look on his face, everything as he was doing it was like it was real. I mean, you could feel the tension. He's like, I don't. It's the worst feeling in the world for anybody when you feel helpless. And I thought he delivered it perfectly, given the circumstance. And then I believe, the listeners will be all over me if I'm wrong. There was a cutaway to commercial, so they left you in that suspense where I've got to have 30 minutes, boom. So what do you do?
Yeah, and that's right. It's just very tense, and you can feel how worried he is. Because we all know that Scotty loves the ship, and you don't insult her. And so I can't imagine being in the positions that he is in numerous times where he's got to save the ship, and there's pressure, and the immense pressure that he has in his field is intense. And you can't change the laws of physics just to try and get out of a situation, even though they do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's move on to another one. This one's from Taste of Armageddon, and I like this a lot. Where he's in an argument pretty much on the bridge, and I should note that a lot of Scotty's best lines came when he was in charge. So we can't forget that he was third in command of the Enterprise, so the third ranking officer on the ship after Mr. Spock, which was definitely appropriate. And he did some of his best work commanding the Enterprise. So, anyway.
I like when the engineers are in charge.
You like when engineers are in charge. Okay. There it is. All right. Well, I guess we'll be talking about Geordi and others some other time. So in this line, he says, diplomacy, the best diplomat I know is a fully charged phaser bank. So that's a warrior's heart if I've ever heard it, right?
I think so. And I wonder if the writers, based off of his past and fighting in World War II and everything that he went through, I wonder if that's part of what this line is and what this line represents. And it just shows that he is very not like quick to the draw, as you would say in like a Western, but you kind of can. What do you think on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that we don't know a lot about Scotty in his history in the beginning, right? It just like all the characters, it kind of grows and you get to know them a little bit more. But we know that he was a focused engineer. And so as far as, training and ability and agility of being a starship captain, you would say there was a very big change from the way TOS was written to the way TNG was written. And it's even noted in Voyager, that they were a little bit quicker to draw a phaser back in those days. And I think that's the mindset. They're running, I know it's a science vessel as well as a warship, but it definitely hit the situation there in A Taste of Armageddon. If you look at it, I mean, you got two worlds that are essentially killing each other cleanly, surgically. And, just a very interesting approach to things. But it's the second time we've seen a line like that. Captain Kirk, when he's down on Argania, actually uses the words, I'm a soldier, not a diplomat. Because they were at war at the time. So it's just kind of the mindset, you got to get things done. And if you want to mess around, we'll mess around. And it was definitely at the time a pretty good line, but it gave us a little insight to how Scotty works. He's very binary.
I would agree with you there. I think so. So I'm going to jump into the next one, and this is probably one of my favorite things, and I love the humor that Scotty has. It's not quite the dry British humor, but I see how they tried to give him that. So we have TOS Trouble with Tribbles. Before they went into warp, I transported the whole kit and caboodle into their engine room, where there'll be no Tribble at all. And I just love that. I think that he had the ingenuity to say, I'm just going to transport all these Tribbles onto the Klingon ship.
Well,
then we're rid of them, and we're rid of the Klingons all at the same time.
Yes, there's a little bit of impish humor with Mr. Scott, and a little bit of getting even, right? Yes. He had a bit of a bout with them. He didn't like him at all.
Well, they insulted the ship.
Of course, he insulted the ship, which actually probably was the best line and best exchange. And all, and it's one that I missed, so I apologize to the listeners, because that was classic as to when he threw the first punch and why. And Captain Kirk's dismay that it wasn't when they insulted him, it was when they insulted the Enterprise. And so that alone was great. But it was a great ending to a great episode. David Gerald's line here was absolutely perfect and well placed, I thought. So he did a really nice job with it. And it brought the whole episode into it closed the loop, I guess. But I do love the run-up to it, where it's like,
yes.
Scotty, you didn't. Like he just heartlessly beamed them out into space, and kind of the discussions that went before that. So, yeah, it was, again, classic Scotty. And more times than you realize, Scotty brought it home.
He did, and that's what's really nice. And can you imagine if they had decided that they didn't want an engineer? Like, would they have given these lines, given this to another character, or would we just not have had it at all?
I know it. It's I'm glad that it was him. And like I said, Doohan was a well accomplished actor before like DeForest Kelley was. And so, back in the day, not only could he pull off, the interesting Scottish accent that he had, but, his mannerisms, I thought were perfect.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, ready for the next one?
I am.
All right, so this one's from A Piece of the Action. And I love this line because of the way it was delivered, right? You mind your place, mister, you'll be wearing concrete galoshes. I loved that because he's looking so proud of himself. He actually, if I remember, he kind of tilts up on his tiptoes and comes back down because he thinks he's a cool gangster. Completely flubs it. The guy's looking at him with like he's got two heads. It was just, again, another great comedic episode with great lines, fish out of water. But Scotty trying to act like he's cool, and as my kids will say sometimes, dad humor. Yeah,
and this is one of those episodes that we have Scotty in charge, because Kirk and Spock are both down on the planet, and they're in trouble, and so they're trying to figure things out. And I love when they're talking to him through the communicator, and Kirk is talking to him, and he's just got this look on his face of sheer bewilderment, like, what did he say? And it took him a while to catch on. And then once he did, he kind of probably swung too far the other way. But it's so funny, and it just fits with the episode that I really like it anyway. So, and concrete galoshes, yeah.
yeah. So I correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the scene was in the transporter room when they beamed up one of the bad guys.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, and I would have liked it if he'd said concrete wellies.
Okay.
Because that's their version of like rain boots. They don't call them rain boots; they call them wellies. So, galoshes, I think of like the waders that my dad would wear when he'd go fishing.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe it could be a generational thing too. I kind of grew up with every once in a while when we put well, back then we called them rubbers, right? The rubber boots, which you pulled them over you, but they were also called galoshes equally by my grandparents. So that's what I knew it from. But I'll be honest, all
galoshes.
The time I spent over there, I never heard wellies before in that. So that's good to know. I've learned something. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
All right, so this next one has a little bit of a tie-in with 2 episodes, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So TOS by any other name, and then kind of paraphrased by Data in Relics, which we will get to later, listeners. It's, it's green. And, it's interesting, the alcohol colors and drink colors on the Star Trek was something interesting. So saying it's green and not knowing what else it is, I love Scotty when he pulls out a bottle of alcohol. It's just fun.
Well, he's drunk,
yes.
As is the I can't remember the guy from the Empire, the Andromeda Galaxy. His name escapes me, but yeah, I love the whole back and forth. But he's gone. I mean, Scotty is just absolutely gone, and he's tilting back and forth, and it's green. And how often we've heard that be mirrored? Anytime you see the color, that kind of even enters into my head because that's how much of a geek I am. So it's classic, and it was neat to see it be brought up again in Relics. That was kind of neat.
Now wait, isn't he pretending to be like extremely drunk?
No, he thinks he can outdrink him, and he does outdrink him.
Right.
And then when he gets the device, he passes out because he's too drunk. So,
that's right. Yeah. Okay, thank you for refreshing my memory.
Hey, there's 79 episodes. There's a lot to remember here.
Yeah, there is.
Okay, so am I up now? I think I am, right?
Yes.
So in the Paradise Syndrome, when his beloved engines fail, I mean, just he can't pull away from the pull from Val, and it's just the him going, oh, my Barons, my poor Barons, his poor babies. It was another a good line that I've mimicked at times. I know when I've needed repairs, or been in a stressful situation, but I thought that it was well delivered for the time, and again, highlights Scotty and his pure love for that ship and what they've done to his engines that they couldn't break away.
Yeah, and that's definitely true, and I appreciate that he does. I mean, an engineer should love the ship. They know it inside and out, and this line definitely shows that he loves the ship more than anything.
He loves that ship. He does. Okay, on to the next one.
All right, so this is from the Enterprise incident. The Enterprise takes no orders except those of Captain Kirk, and if you make any attempt to aboard or commandeer the Enterprise, it will be blown to bits along with as many of you as we can take with us. I find it interesting that he would threaten to blow up the ship. as much as he loves it.
Well, he's surrounded by 3 Romulan ships.
Yes.
And, obviously they want the Enterprise as a prize. And, his message certainly isn't subtle. So, with if the Enterprise goes with just the energy that the antimatter, the warp core will generate, it'll take them all out. So it keeps them from boarding or trying to commandeer the Enterprise. And he meant it, because at this point, he is not in on what Kirk and Spock are doing. So he just knows he's surrounded and that the 2 of them are on board the Romulan vessel. So he delivered it well.
No, he did. And I think that's, again, it points to his character. We, again, don't know a whole lot about him, but I think the lines that we do get that are very memorable, like this one, show that, yes, he loves the ship, but he's willing to do what's necessary and what's needed to protect the ship, to protect the crew and everything else from people who shouldn't. So, I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, next line we have is from the Savage Curtain, and it's just Scotty being sarcastic as always, right? President Lincoln, indeed, no doubt, to be followed by Louis of France and Robert the Bruce. So I believe they're getting ready to be in their dress uniforms and welcome the president on board. But the disdain of Mr. Scott and what's happening here, knowing that none of this could be real, was, I think, quite stated to the obvious. And I guess he wanted to make sure that the captain and Mr. Spock knew how he felt about the present circumstance.
Yeah, that episode and that line is just funny. I think it just shows he's like, really? President Lincoln?
Well, he wasn't far off, right? When other historical characters came to life. So anyway, yeah, it was the way it was said. And, I'm going to tell you that neither Hayley nor I are bringing justice to any of this, but we're having a good time. So if you don't like the way we're delivering these lines, please go back and listen to them, because you will love them in the shows. There's different places on YouTube where you can find all this as well. So enjoy.
Yes. So I'm actually the next one, because it is your favorite film.
Mm-hmm.
Please say the next one.
Okay. So Mr. Scott is greeting Admiral Kirk on the space station just outside of the space dock, and he's already arguing from the second that the Admiral beams aboard that the departure orders are crazy, that the circumstance is dire, and he just says, Admiral, we've just finished 18 months redesigning and refitting the Enterprise. How in the name of hell do they expect me to have me ready for launch in 12 hours? And you can hear the concern in Scotty's voice. It's not the way you would normally hear a miracle worker speak, but it just tells you how grave the situation is, how fast they are adding to the tension of the film at that point, because they have this huge thing coming on them. And he's not familiar with the emergency or the hours, but I thought he delivered that line really well, and the follow-on line to that after Kirk explains the emergency.
Yeah, and again, it shows that he's incredibly hardworking and wants to make sure things are done right and properly, so that the ship keeps working and running, and not in some of the later in the films when it's in disarray and they're taking off and you can clearly tell he's in a panic. Like, what are you doing to my ship?
Yeah, because we really don't. When we see the Enterprise, we can see that she's pretty much put together, but we don't know what phase they're truly in. Whether she was supposed to launch, so if 18 months, was it supposed to be 24? Are they going 6 months early, 2 weeks early? It's really hard to say, but now they have to go in 12 hours, and it's the way he reflects the reality of the situation that gives us just, okay, what condition the ship is in and where it's at. And it's also the big setup for the big reveal of the new starship. So it was well done, well played.
Yes, I quite agree. All right, so the next one, and I'm sorry, listeners, I need to watch more Trek back again. So he says, give the word, Admiral. Mr. Scott, the word is given. Aye, sir. This is from The Wrath of Khan.
That's right. So this is where Kirk is inspecting the engine room, and he's asking them if the ship is ready and can it handle a minor training cruise. And Mr. Scott being very confident, give the word, Admiral. And when he says the word is given, he's all excited. And the word is obviously warp speed, which is words. But it follows throughout. It follows throughout with his nephew who gets killed. Same thing. That's his final words, is give the word, Admiral. So it's kind of a neat phrase that has bigger meaning as the movie goes on.
Thank you for refreshing my memory.
No problem. I think, like I've said many, many times, that I have seen Star Trek II more than any other movie in history. And, I think that a lot of us out there, unfortunately, not something we're proud of, could say every single line, probably even in parentheses, the thoughts that are happening. It's a little scary.
We all have movies that are like that.
Yeah. But hey, it's a great Star Trek film.
It is.
Okay, we ready for the next one?
Yes.
Okay. So this one is from Star Trek III. They've just stolen the Enterprise, and the Excelsior has just puttered out behind it. And Mr. Scott is giving the data sensors or whatever to McCoy as one surgeon to another. But the line he uses is actually colloquial. It's used a lot in different ways, but I thought it was very appropriate here. And he actually says to the doctor, says, the more they overthink the plumbing, the easier it is to stop up the drain. And it's a common phrase that's used all the time when things break down on sophisticated pieces of equipment because they've over-designed it. And there's a lot of truth to that in many, many things.
Oh, I definitely would agree too with that. I think that's along the lines of if it's not broken, don't fix it.
Yep.
And unfortunately it happens a lot. I think this is a great line just because it shows probably, I think, some of his frustration that they keep upgrading the ship and then adding all these components that as an engineer, he's like, why is this here? We don't need this, or it's a redundancy in something. And I can't imagine what that would be like.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because in my line of work, I see this phenomena quite often where we have a relatively simple process, and then people will come along and they'll add more and more requirements. And so to make what was once a relatively simple part, now it is extremely difficult with, a dozen or more certain aspects to the process that could stop it. And it happens all the time. And it's actually human nature. It really is. We bring chaos to simplicity instead of bringing simplicity to chaos. That's a Ken Tripp original, by the way, trademarked 6/15/2019. And so it just fits with the whole, as we move forward with a lot of sophisticated systems. You can build all the computers in the world, but once the Wi-Fi's down, they're no good. So it's just interesting to me, right?
It is, and I see this even with my line of work, with changing different forms and different things, and I'm like, but it was fine beforehand. Leave it alone.
Yep. Yeah. It's people they've got to change things, and people have to stay relevant in their roles and their jobs, and so in some cases they're good and necessary changes, and other times it's like, man, oh man, it's clear we didn't need this role in our company because all it did was add more extreme or complicate things instead of simplify. Which if you're good at your role, in any role that you do, you simplify. Exactly. There we go.
All right. Well, I forget the context of this one, but I really like this just because it is humor. So this is from Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. And Scotty's in the turbo lift of the Excelsior, says, up your shaft.
Well, this is pretty common. Line you hear a lot of times, but again, the context was, he just met the captain of the Excelsior who met him in the engineering spaces, and he says, we look forward to breaking a lot of the Enterprise's speed records tomorrow. And Scotty is,
That's
you know,
right.
not too happy about it, and he's nodding his head, and he's going, that we will, sir, or whatnot. And so you know he's already not in a good mood. He gets on the turbo lift, and the turbo lift speaks, and it just says, level, please. You know, and then his response is, it gives him the number in the bridge or whatever in a transporter room. And the turbo lift actually says, thank you. And that's when he says, up your shaft. You know, so it was clever. It was clever. Well done. Again, you know, Scotty does bring a lot of humor to the show, a lot of humor to the movies as well.
I completely agree with you there.
Okay.
You want me to do the next one, or do you
Sure,
want to
go ahead, because you only had 3 lines on the other ones, and I'm hoping that
All right,
behind the scenes you're going, this is to you, Ken. So anyway, go on.
So from Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, we've got a few here. I really like this one. A keyboard. How quaint.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I love the lead up to it, that he's looking at this thing and he's got the mouse. Hello, computer.
Yeah.
And that whole scene is just so fun. But then once he starts typing on the keyboard, and he gets going, it's really fun to watch. But the fact that he was just kind of like, a keyboard, really?
Yeah. How quaint. It's it is funny when we come along things that are older, and in our arrogance, you know, just kind of look at it and go, oh, you know, how quaint. But for the time, fairly modern. But yeah, that was a great line. And you know, Star Trek 4 had so many great lines for all the characters that, you know, that to bring in the humor or to increase the drama. And, you know, it was nice to see Scotty had quite a few of that. It was nice to have Scotty just on a little adventure on his own with Bones, you know, and Sulu. So that in itself was different, because it kind of broke up the big 3, and it became, you know, Kirk and Spock, and then other groups of 2 or 3. So it was neat the way they did it. Okay, so I'm up next. Okay, so the next one is also from Star Trek 4. This is when they're on the Klingon planet, so it's not in order of how things happen, but he's on the Klingon planet, and they want to get the ship ready to get back to Earth, and Kirk is asking him when they can go, and his line is, "Give me one more day, sir. Damage control's easy. Reading Klingon, that's hard." So they got the bounty up and running. Just you know, a pretty direct and easy line to give, but is just showing the struggles that he's having navigating the ship and trying to figure out Klingon as he goes.
Yeah, and I couldn't even imagine. I know I have friends that know Klingon and speak it, but for Scotty, someone who's grown up in this era of, you know, we're not friends with the Klingons, so they only know what they know, to have to be the engineer of a Klingon ship to get them back home, pretty difficult.
All right, so I want to go back to something you just said. You actually know people who can speak Klingon? Like fluently speak it?
Yes, there's a couple, they actually, and I'm sure you've met them, they go to STLV, and they do Lursa and B'Etor.
Oh, yeah.
They translate and do Klingon karaoke night, and they translate songs from English to Klingon and practice them.
Oh my goodness. Okay. That's incredible.
Yes.
Incredible.
I know.
Yes.
And I know a few other people, for listeners, if you're really big on Klingons and you ascribe to Klingon, you can actually do Klingon through, I believe, Rosetta Stone.
No.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Okay. All right. I mean, like I said, you know, everybody knows Kapla and a few lines here and there, but I was like, oh, okay. And
yep.
I always thought, because I do remember that on The Big Bang Theory, when, you know, asked if they were bilingual and one of them spoke Klingon, you know, that was a pretty funny line. I didn't realize. Yeah, I guess it makes sense. Besides, was it Mark Okrand who came up with the language himself, that there's actually people that speak it. I guess I knew there were people that did. I guess I didn't realize you knew, or that by extension I knew anyone who could do it so thoroughly. That's wow. Okay.
It's pretty intense. It's really awesome. I think they're just because there's enough out there that they can compile the language together. I would love it if we could do it for Vulcan, but there's just not enough. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. I know you can speak it, but we're just going to keep that confidential.
All right, so the next one is also from Star Trek 4. This one needs no lead up. Admiral, there be whales here!
Yep.
We all know it. It's great. I love the sheer joy and delight on Scotty's face when he's made this container for the whales and they beam him on board, and he's so excited about it. Makes you excited about it.
He does.
Awesome.
He does. It's a great connection point. You know, right after they get away from the pirates and they're about to head back to Earth in the 23rd century. But yeah, it was very nautical too. And I kind of like that aspect of it. So I agree with you.
Yes.
All right. The next one from that brilliant film, Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. And don't get on me. I know there's a lot of people out there that love Star Trek V. All right.
I like 5.
We did
We've
a
had that
whole show on
discussion.
5. We've done many shows on 5. We want to bring AJ in here to play Cybok using Sean Connery's accent, which he does brilliantly.
Mm-hmm.
And there are aspects of 5 I really like, and then there's aspects of it that really let me down. But
Yes.
this was one of them that let me down. I know this ship like the back of my hand, and then bang, he knocks himself unconscious. In my opinion, the aspect of this movie that let me down was the comedy wasn't natural, right? It was an element added to it because they were so much trying to marry up to the success of Star Trek IV, and have the kind of tension and exciting adventure that you need, that it just became slapsticky. And, you know, I, like I've told all of you listeners in an episode not that long ago that I myself have knocked myself out on a ship, banging on pipes, very different circumstance. So I know it can happen, but it shouldn't happen to Scotty. That's just me. But anyway, a lot of people love that. They love the line and they love the next piece. I don't know. You love the movie. Did it? You reflect differently?
I agree with you on this part, and I like the line because, yes, Scotty would know the ship like the back of his hand, but the sheer banging his head and falling down, I didn't enjoy. And I also didn't enjoy that, weren't they passing that off as he was in a Jeffries tube, but man, he sure could walk upright in that Jeffries tube?
Yeah, I don't know if it was necessarily a Jeffries tube. It was definitely a maintenance area. You know, it wasn't on. It was offside of the main deck. So, but you're right. You know, there was a lot of piping and things, and it could happen. It just, like I said, it was the attempt at humor there. I think it worked for a lot of people. It just didn't work for me. It's okay. Who am I, right? Just that's all.
It's all right.
Yeah.
All right. So the next one comes also from Star Trek V, and I actually like this line. U.S. Enterprise Shakedown Cruise Report. I think this quote-unquote new ship was put together by monkeys. Oh, she's got a fine engine, but half the doors won't open, and guess whose job it is to make it right? Yeah, poor Scotty trying to put this ship together and fixing it, and I just felt for him. It's almost like Miles with all of the stuff when they first get to Deep Space Nine, and he's just running ragged, trying to get everything fixed, and it seems like apparently everybody just keeps asking him and nobody else, and so it's just poor Scotty. He's just left to fix all this stuff and make it right, and I feel for him.
Yeah. Well, you know, there's also the line in there where they say they don't think he's ever been happier because he's so needed. But you know, the ship's condition, all of that stuff. He's the first voice we hear, and kind of the first characters we see when getting back to the Enterprise itself, right? So we've got the big three down on the planet, you know, at Yosemite doing their thing. But this was the introduction to, you know, the slapsticky USS Enterprise. You know, here's my beautiful ship, and it's, you know, it's a joke. It's a clown car, and unfortunately, Mr. Scott is the one in charge of putting it all back together, and you know, he's telling us, oh, the engine's fine, right? Which was always the opposite. Everything else worked, but they always struggled with the engines and warp speed. But now, you know, so you've got this incredible ability to travel, 100 times faster than the speed of light, but the doors won't open, or this won't happen. Which, when you think about it, a spacefaring vessel, that's pretty scary. that all those systems are failing or whatnot. As much as they make light of it, it certainly wasn't in any condition to get underway. It also didn't make sense that there was less than a skeleton crew on board. But I'm getting into Star Trek V. The line was fine. It was the introduction to like I said, to that section of the movie, and it honed us in pretty quickly, just in how rough shape the ship was in.
Mm-hmm. And I definitely don't think I would go aboard a ship that the engines were fine, but everything else wasn't.
Nope.
I'd go aboard one where everything else was fine and maybe the engines weren't, but not the other way around.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we move on to Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. And I left this quote here because I think it's an important quote for the wrong reason. And this is, after Kirk has gone aboard and the doctor's gone aboard the Klingon ship, and they've been arrested, and they're talking about the whole scenario, and Scotty's line is, "I'll bet that Klingon bitch killed her father," and that is one of a few other lines by other characters within the show that really pulled me out of who the characters are, what we believe they to be, and brings us all kind of backwards. Even given the gravity and the emotion of the situation, I'm not a big fan of when anybody calls anybody a bad name like bitch or bastard or anything, and I think it's very degrading. And I don't believe that this is Scotty, and I think that Denny Martin Flynn and Nicholas Meyer, who wrote this script, essentially, they made some big mistakes. As much as I love the movie, I really don't like what they made our characters say, and I wish the characters had fought harder to not say certain things, and this is one of them.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. This definitely, even as he's gotten older, I can't picture Scotty saying something like this. No matter the circumstances or, age or anything like that. I mean, you can take a look at, now I'm forgetting the episode title. I'm bad at that. Essentially the Jack the Ripper episode.
Devil in the Dark.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's not it either. Yeah, sorry. Go on.
See, even when that episode is a Scotty-centric one, and he's being accused of murder and things like that, even then his character did not turn and basically do this 180 on who he is. Yes, Wolf in the Fold. Thank you.
Don't be me.
And so I agree with you there. This was very not Scotty at all.
I don't think it's Star Trek. I don't think it's Star Trek.
Right.
I don't think any of the characters would talk that way. I don't think there would be degradation of women, Klingon or not, and that's why it's always bothered me, because and I'll be honest. Like I said, I know I'm a bit of a prude when it comes to certain things, and other things I'm not. But I don't even like it. And you see it on primetime TV all the time too. They'll say, "Oh, that bitch" or whatever, and it's like I don't like that stuff. I really don't. And I prefer we didn't do it in our own timeline. I certainly don't want them doing it. So, end of speech.
Yeah.
Okay, we've killed that one.
We did. But we're going to move on to an episode that I think TOS and TNG fans like. It's definitely one that I enjoy. And so these next several quotes all come from TNG episode Relics. And this has got some really great ones. So the first one here, we've got NCC 1701. No bloody A, B, C, or D, mind you. And I think this is just classic.
It is at the time. Poor Mr. Scott is not treated very well, I don't think. Again, it's funny how you watch Star Trek and then you see how some characters get written and they're consistently, pretty good in character and so forth. Although I know there's been a lot of talks about Geordi being a jerk. And having that way about him sometimes. But here's a guy who feels very lonely, very out of place, because he is, wanting to see his old ship. And I think I can speak for folks, as you get older, you do become more nostalgic. You do miss certain things in your life. and you wish you could recreate them. And just the way he's talking to the computer about wanting to see the Enterprise, and the way he's even talking to the computer about what he's looking for was pretty funny, and she asked for more information about what exactly, there were 7 starships or 6 starships, whatever it was with that name. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah. And I know as a Geordi fan, I get a lot of flack from people because of this episode, because of his treatment towards Scotty. But I think he redeems himself at the end, and I love the kind of relationship that they get together because they're engineers. They love their ship so much. It's just hard at first.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I say sometimes the writers do crazy things, and they take these characters that are well established and they pull them out, and you go, that's not who they are. And even under tension, stress, duress, I know we have our patience can get short, but Geordi was over the top. But you're right, they bring him around.
Yep.
All right, so the next line was, I've spent my whole life trying to figure out crazy ways of doing things. I thought that was a nice synopsis of Mr. Scott's career as a miracle worker, as trying to figure things out and fixing things. And, just a cute line that, kind of says, one of the things that's unique about Star Trek is in most of this series, not all, but when you're really out there on your own, you have to find innovative, crazy ways. I mean, think of Dr. McCoy and the number of cures he had to come up with throughout the shows. And it's the same, for Crusher and the rest. I mean, they have to keep coming up with innovative ideas to fix things because they are out on their own and they're limited to the technology they have on within their hands. And I thought this is just a nice kind of a mentoring speech, like this is nothing new and this is the stuff we do as engineers.
Exactly. And I like that line. I also like this next one that he says, starship captains are like children. They want everything right now and they want it their way. The secret is to give them what they need, not what they want. And this is when he's talking with Geordi and, about handling captains, because Geordi's kind of in that same situation that Scotty's been in a lot with Kirk throughout TOS in the films, in that, they're being asked something in a situation and they're under some pressure and stress or time crunch or whatever it is. And it's like, okay, but I can't give it to you exactly how and when you want it.
I think it is great advice. A great analogy. And it's a home run line. It really is, especially when you're under pressure, and as we all learn, that you don't magnify the timelines by a factor of 4. How else can you keep your reputation as a miracle worker? All that. There were a lot of lines in Relics, and as we were saying off mic, that the one thing about this episode is when you have a main character, or I should say a supporting character as the main character, he has a lot more lines, and Scotty didn't have a ton of lines in any of the movies or the shows. I mean, a ton. But in this episode, because it was all about him, I think the writers did a really good job of taking, an older seasoned veteran, at first kind of being a little bit of a nuisance, but not because he wanted to be, who wants to share his stories and adventures, but nobody wants to listen to him. So it makes him a very sympathetic character. And then at the end, he's the wise old captain giving the new guy great advice. It comes full circle.
Yeah, and that's something I find. I would have been so excited to have seen Scotty that I would have said, yes, let's go to 10 forward and you can sit and tell me all your stories. But that's just me and that's who I am. So I very much related to him in this episode and the struggle he was having, where he just wanted to sit down with someone and chat and talk about how things had changed. So
Yeah, it was an underwritten role, I think, for Troy, where I think that she could have been a much bigger part of the show in many aspects, and kind of helped both sides kind of bridge that gap. She does to a degree, but it's not to the level it could have been.
I agree.
Okay. So you read the last one, right? Okay, so where are we? All right, so we have synthetic Scotch, synthetic commanders. Yes. I love that line a lot. I thought that was brilliant when he met Data, and was when he was being explained about synthahol and what that is,
Yes.
which sounds so boring. But I think putting the two together in the context was pretty funny, and the way he does it kind of as an aha moment. Well, synthetic Scotch. It's just like there's a lot of things that aren't real anymore.
Yeah. I like that one. All right. I may be captain by rank, but I never wanted to be anything else but an engineer. And I think that's exactly who Scotty is.
I don't think there was a better last line to give for this podcast talking about Scott than that one, right?
Well, Scotty and his adventures aren't the only things we're talking about on Trek FM. Here's what is happening elsewhere on the network.
Previously on Trek.fm, Earl Grey.
Yeah, this is the part where I put in my notes, well, this is a nice after-school special. Like
After-school special?
It just sort of wraps
just
up
spit his water.
everything.
Primitive Culture, a look at history and culture through Star Trek.
Imagine if that had have happened in The Next Generation in season 2, that suddenly you'd had, an older Spock turn up, and you'd had Scotty come through his Dyson sphere or whatever, and then old McCoy's rattling around, and they take over, and they're basically the front.
They come to hijack the Enterprise.
Hijack the Enterprise, yeah, and
steal it
Spock
off
goes,
Captain Picard.
Yeah, Spock goes, we're going to recover Captain Kirk from the Nexus or whatever, and imagine that. Imagine if it becomes that. I mean, you'd be watching it thinking, what is going on?
Literary Treks.
There's some really great artwork in these that I don't think we give it enough praise for that.
I almost want to take that panel and remove all the lightning and the pizzazz and all that stuff out of there and just put them in a disco room, and it would almost look like they're dancing.
Yeah, it's just a Star Trek dance party, like Kirk's practically dabbing.
Exactly, that's what I was just thinking.
Oh, I love it.
Warp 5.
The first joke in the film that I thought was truly funny was the long-distance call that he was getting from Lon Chaney's character, and he's turning into the Wolfman on the phone, right? And the guy is like, why are you calling long distance just to have your dog bark at me on the phone? And I'm like, it's like, I think that's a great line. I think it's really funny because it's like, you can't see what's going on. Because long distance in that day and age would have been like frickin' expensive, right?
And that's what else is happening on Trek.fm.
So check out all of these shows and find out what we're talking about in your favorite corner of the Star Trek universe and beyond. You'll find us wherever you get your podcasts. If you're an Apple user, you can get the show on iTunes or the Apple Podcast app. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. That helps us out greatly and makes it easier for other listeners to find the show. If you're not an Apple user, we've got you covered as well. You can find our shows on Stitcher, TuneIn, Spreaker, SoundCloud, Windows Phone, and of course you can stream and download the MP3 file from our website and grab the RSS link as well. If you would like to get in touch with us here at Trek FM, you can always find us on trek.fm/contact and look in the sidebar on the show page. Or you can go to speakpipe.com/trekfm and please leave us a voice message. You can also contact us through Twitter at Trek FM, Facebook at facebook.com/trekfm, and the Babel Conference. Type the Babel Conference, that's BABEL, into the search field on Facebook, or go to our website at trekfm.com and click discussion on the menu bar. Another way you can help us keep all of our shows coming to you each week is to become a patron of the network on Patreon. If you visit patreon.com/trekfm, that's patreon.com/trekfm, you'll find our current goals and different milestone contribution levels, along with all of the great perks we have for you. These perks include early access to content, exclusive content, producer credit, seats on our content development team, and more. We really appreciate any support you can give us and hope you'll join the team. Again, you'll find the details at patreon.com/trekfm. Speaking of Patreon, Thank you as always to our associate producers for Standard Orbit. They are Norman C. Lau, Nick Anastasio, Tim Robertson, Richard Marquez, Corey Elrod, Dan Rhodes, and Mike Richards. Your contributions and support mean the world to us, and we appreciate you being associate producers on Standard Orbit. You can find me on Twitter at Trekkie01D. You can also hear me talking about both Discovery and the Orville over on the Fandom Podcast Network's Discoville podcast that drops every week. So thanks for listening, and join us again next time here on Trek FM for another episode of Standard Orbit.